Glad everyone could be here tonight. I'm excited to have this crowd. I'm excited about this panel. This is something that we look forward to doing for a while and got scheduled, and I appreciate a lot of people who helped make that happen. And I just want to mention real quick that so many hands went into this. I want to thank them real quick. I want to thank FHU. I want to thank President and First Lady, David and Tracy Shannon. They've been very supportive, and the administration. A lot of prayers have also been offered. And also thank some specific areas such as IT, who's been very helpful, security, also dining services, the alumni services. There's been a lot of facilities. There's been a lot of people who have helped put this on. I just really appreciate that. I'm also appreciative of the Bramlett Group and the work they've done to help advertise it. For Pesos, offering free coffee, two of my favorite words to put together. Make sure you get some of that if you would like some. Look forward to them opening up in town soon as well. Also, I really appreciate the History Department for co-hosting this with us and the effort they're putting into it. I appreciate their voice and their attitude in addressing these sort of issues. We just really are blessed with our history professors here, and I'm thankful for them. And I'm thankful for See the Bridge group that I've been a part of. I'm thankful for Nadine for helping me co-lead the discussion group there, for the people who took part in that, and their just courage and wisdom in sharing their experiences that I was so unaware of, and they've really helped me to develop a better understanding, and I hope that we can also learn from people tonight to develop a better understanding. I especially want to thank Nadine and Sandra and KJ and Corey, who all helped plan this specific panel. It was something that we worked hard on developing questions and setting the tone and what the theme is to do this. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to have a few opening remarks to help frame the discussion. And then Dr. Greg Massey, who just completed and is about to publish, like within the week, a history book on it, the history of FHU, a book about that. He's going to come up and give some remarks just to help give some context for the racial history of FHU that I think will be new to a lot of us. I'm expecting to learn some new things out of this as well. And then we'll have the panelists come up, and the bulk of our time will be that panel featuring 4 of our alumni, all of whom I love and think are amazing. And they represent everybody from our very distinguished Dr. Saunders, who graduated in 1967, all the way up to Sandra, who just graduated a few weeks ago. So a good spread of information, although apparently I did miss a few in the 70s and 80s, and try and do that another time. So I want to give a few opening remarks to help frame this before we get started, though. This is a listening experience, and how we listen matters. It is easy to sit and listen openly to people who speak thoughts you agree with and who share a common experience you understand. And there will be some of that. We are all part of and care about the community of Henderson and FHU. However, it is much more difficult to listen openly to people who speak thoughts you disagree with or describe experiences that differ from yours. And there will be some of that too, because many of us are white. And we are here to better understand the Black experience at FHU. So I want to challenge each of us right now to decide to enter into this conversation with humility and empathy, with an openness to understanding rather than a ready response to defend. Why does it matter? History impacts who we are now. In our past, whether nationally or locally, our Freed-Hardeman University, race has played a significant part in influencing who we are because it has determined who was valued and who was not, who was allowed and who was not. Do we still live in an era of slavery or Jim Crow segregation? No, we do not. But have we adequately understood and addressed the barriers created by those hundreds of years of racism, which include nearly 100 years of segregation at FHU? No, we haven't done that either. We might not see these barriers, especially if you're a white like me, but that does not mean they aren't there. It just means we aren't seeing them. But I want us to consider a couple points that help me. A couple summers ago, I was in this very room for NYC, the National Youth Conference. Now, those who aren't familiar with the National Youth Conference, it's like a Black Horizons, or Horizons is like a white NYC. And it was a little unnerving. Being white, I forgot how often I'm in white spaces where I'm comfortable, and I don't have to think about my race. It is these rare, uncomfortable experiences that make me wonder, how intentional are we about recognizing the impact on a person of color when they're constantly in a white space? Does that person feel valued? Does this person feel as though she belongs here at FHU as she is? Or does she feel that she's allowed to be here as long as she doesn't act a certain way or say certain things? Is she pretty for a black girl? Personally, or as an institution, I'm not aware of anyone who desires to make people feel less than another based on race. But one of the stats that always jumps out at me is that the Churches of Christ are composed of about 30% people of color, with a little more than half of that being black, according to Pew Research. But at FHU, our undergraduate student body is less than 10% people of color, and has declined in the last few years, even though the national racial diversity is growing. That should tell us something. That should be a flag that maybe we are missing something from our white perspective. Over the last few years, I've spent time talking to black alumni, students, faculty, and I'm often surprised at how much I didn't know. I didn't know because I never thought to think about what it's like to be a black person on this campus. Now, not every black person's story is the same. Not every black person has the same ideas of how to address these issues. But there is a surprising consistency in some of the experiences. Also, it's important to note that there are other people of color who aren't black, and they have their own perspective. And I want to acknowledge that as well. But realistically, we don't have enough time to dig deeply into this narrative in one panel discussion, let alone others. So what I hope that you will listen, that you will listen openly and see this as a starting point to a bigger conversation, where people who look like me recognize that we need to do more listening. We need to be asking questions that show an openness to learning rather than a defensive response. We need to approach conversations with more empathy and humility. And remember that while each person is more than their race, race is a part of each person's identity, including our own. This attitude is not just reflective of seeking to better fulfill FHU's mission to help students develop their God-given talents for His glory. But it's also part of our Christian mission. We should be, in all humility, considering others more significant than ourselves. We look not only to our own interests, but also the interests of others, having this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. The same Christ who in sacrificial love broke down the dividing wall between God and man to build His church, also broke down the dividing wall between Jew and Gentile to build His church. This was more than a religious division, but included seemingly insurmountable barriers formed between ethnicities over centuries. We can read quite a bit about the first century church wrestling with this issue out of a desire to be unified as one body reflective of the kingdom of God. I look at our still racially segregated churches, and I look at underrepresentation at universities, and FHU is definitely not alone here. And I question, what can we do to do the hard work to be reflective of that multi-ethnic kingdom in the 21st century? When I hear stories from those who don't feel they fully belong because of skin color, and when I realize my complete lack of awareness, I know we have to do something because this isn't how the kingdom looks. Revelation 7:9 speaks of John's kingdom vision, where people from every language and ethnicity are gathered together around the throne glorifying God. That's what we as Christians and as an institution with the foundation of faith should reflect. Our 150th anniversary is a good time to do this. It's a time to celebrate the accomplishments of the past 150 years, and there are plenty of those. But it's also time to reflect on and lament where we have fallen short, so that we can grow in our university and in our Christian missions. Our goal in conversations like this is not to try to close Freed-Hardeman's doors because of its racist past. Our goal is to ask, how can we further open the doors that have yet to be fully swung open because of its racist past? How do we work to understand and remove barriers to better fulfill our mission and to benefit the students and the university as a whole? Everyone presenting here today is here because they care enough about FHU to honestly discuss these issues. I am thankful you are here to listen and learn as we take a small step towards doing that. At the end, I'm also going to mention a couple of ways that we can join in further moving this conversation forward. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Greg and Leslie.
All right, good evening. Before I begin, I just want to make a quick comment. At this event, if you, when we finish, if you feel that some things have reached you in your thinking, in your heart, you feel like you've been blessed, I want to encourage you to thank the gentleman who preceded me, Micah Smith. He's the one most responsible for this event. Either thank him in person, send him an email, Facebook him, and let him know what the event meant to you. We appreciate your hard work in making this a reality, Micah. The Tennessee General Assembly chartered the Henderson Male and Female Institute in November 1869. And that's why we are legitimately celebrating the 150th anniversary of higher education, these schools that one went to the other over that time. This institute officially opened in 1871, replacing a two-room school that had been operating since at least 1866 on the lot that's now occupied by Old Main. In nearly 100 years, the Henderson schools experienced many changes in name, changes in church affiliation, but there were also things that remained constant. One of those things that remained constant was segregation. All the Henderson schools were administered by white people, with white people teaching the classes to all white students. Fast forwarding to 1951. In Sylman, Tennessee, a local school superintendent, a member of the Church of Christ, encouraged a promising young student named Calvin Bowers to apply to Freed-Hardeman College, a nearby school. FHC sent Bowers a rejection letter with these words: "We regret to inform you that no provisions are made for colored students to attend Freed-Hardeman College." Three other Church of Christ colleges, David Lipscomb, Harding, and Abilene Christian, sent Bowers similar rejection letters. Only Pepperdine College, which was then in Los Angeles, admitted black students. The black students were not allowed in the white residential dormitories. Bowers moved to California to attend Pepperdine. As he remembered later in his autobiography, he traveled west, and I quote him here, "not merely because it was the land of opportunity, but because it was my only opportunity." 3 years later, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a unanimous decision in the landmark case, Brown versus Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas, declaring segregated public schools unconstitutional. On the Freed-Hardeman campus, our students discussed the implications of this decision. The campus newspaper, which was called The Skyrocket, surveyed students on 2 different occasions, and most of them favored ending segregation at FHC. Those same students, however, didn't agree on the timing of integration. "As the situation now stands in the South," said one of the students, "I believe it would be extremely unwise to admit Negroes to FHC." The school newspaper's student editor agreed and supported gradual over immediate change. And the editor wrote, "Teaching is the only answer, and not coercion. People cannot and should not be forced to regard others as equals. Such compulsion would deny them freedom of choice, which is fundamental in Christianity and democracy." That student editor's words, it should be noted, resemble the words of the American president at that time, Dwight D. Eisenhower. These skyrocket editors recognized that civil rights for African Americans was a timely matter worthy of discussion. FHC's administration, however, made no public mention of the issue, but did discuss it behind closed doors. Our campus hosted the annual meeting of Christian college presidents in January 1955, and the conference that year was organized around this theme, Current Problems in Christian Education. One session addressed segregation and integration. That was the title. And there were 3 presentations in that session, one on social mores, one on public opinion, and the other on the attitudes of Christian colleges. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a record of the discussion. In fact, all I ever found about it was one newspaper blurb announcing that the conference was occurring. But we do know that one of the presenters at this session, Segregation and Integration, was President George Benson of Harding College. And Benson later publicly expressed the rationale for continuing segregation. And he said that admitting schools to Harding will deprive us of white donors and white students. So I think we can safely assume that administrators at Freed-Hardeman College, Abilene Christian College, and David Lipscomb College felt the same way, and felt those fears that Benson had. During the early 1960s, as the African American struggle for civil rights gained momentum, President H.A. Dixon of Freed-Hardeman College began to reconsider our school's stance. He realized that continued segregation was indefensible. So what I'm going to describe for you now is a private conversation in President Dixon's office in Old Main. And there's 3 people present. One is President Dixon. The other is the influential missionary and preacher, Ira Rice Jr. And then the third person there was B.C. Goodpasture, editor of the Gospel Advocate. Now this is close to 60 years ago. Churches of Christ were different. And it was a time when periodicals like Gospel Advocate and Firm Foundation wielded a lot of influence. And we'll just go ahead and say power. And Gospel Advocate had a huge circulation. Goodpasture was a man who had considerable influence. College presidents, President Shannon at this time, also wielded considerable influence in the Brotherhood. And then so did individuals like Ira Rice. So these in a sense were 3 power players in our Brotherhood. But they're discussing the issue of segregation and possible integration. Now, Ira Rice, to some people who are a little older, like myself, we think of him, we think of contending for the faith. We think of strident conservatism. What we don't know about Rice is that he was a missionary in Indonesia, and perhaps from that experience, perhaps just from the gospel, he believed that the churches should reflect the world. And not the sin of the world, but the complexity, the diversity of the world that Micah just talked about it. Rice believed that our churches should include whites, blacks, browns, yellows, reds, worshiping together. So Rice, even though he loved Freed-Hardeman College, had told President Dixon, I want my daughters to come here, but I will not send them here if this remains an all-white segregated school. So they're discussing this issue privately. And Dixon said, I have been put on notice by Henderson residents. If black students are admitted to Freed-Hardeman College, they will burn the college to the ground. Now, those threats may have been a bluff, but Dixon took them seriously. He was by nature a very cautious conservative leader. He was very averse to taking risks. So admitting black students alone was a risk. These threats reinforced his natural tendency to be cautious. But very aware that Rice opposed segregation, wanted integration, Dixon gave assurances that he would revise FHC's admission policy once he was certain there would be no violent reprisals against the campus. Ultimately, Dixon's wait-and-see approach continued until he risked losing federal funding. Title IV of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 forbade discrimination by institutions receiving federal funds. So if Freed-Hardeman College continued its practice of segregation, it risked losing the loan money from the National Defense Act. So let's explain a little bit about the National Defense Act. When the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in 1957, it seized our country in panic and self-reflection. And a panicked Congress immediately passed the National Defense Act, which President Eisenhower promptly signed. And it was designed, among other things, to promote STEM education, giving loans to students pursuing study in the sciences and mathematics, and also giving loans to students pursuing teacher education. The loans would go directly to colleges, and then they would give the loans to the students. So across our country, public and private universities took advantage of this student loan money. And among those colleges was Freed-Hardeman College. And the enrollments at universities across the land rose because of this new program. So now a segregated FHC risked losing National Defense Act student loan funds. But there was more. This same civil rights legislation also made available federal work-study funds. So all of this could possibly be lost. So in Chapel Hall, on the last chapel program of the spring 1965 semester, President Dixon announced to the faculty and students that that fall Freed-Hardeman College was desegregating to avoid losing federal money. I want to conclude with two quotations. And I'm just going to make the quotations. I'll comment briefly on the first one, not on the second one. I'll leave it to you to ponder the implications of these quotations, which describe earlier generations at our school and the blind spots of people. The first quotation is from Fred Daly, who was a faculty member here from the mid-1970s to the mid-1980s, and I interviewed him about his experiences, and we were talking about the history of segregation as well as the struggles that he witnessed in the 1970s as our campus moved from junior college status to senior college status, doubled in enrollment, and there was a targeted effort to increase the number of minority students, and they rose to the highest level of all time. And it created growing pains and tensions. But Fred said this, and I quote him, "Freed-Hardeman was an island of virtue in the larger sea of Southern rural culture. The school absorbed the values of that culture, and those values were extremely difficult to overcome." In other words, FHC's people struggled with the tension of living in the world, but not being of it. Christians have struggled with that tension since the day of Pentecost to today, and will continue to until Jesus comes. We continue to face it today. The next quotation is not about race relations, but it's from a preacher named Henry Ficklin, who's not a name most of us know, but he was a prominent preacher for a while in the 1940s, 50s, and beyond, and he spoke at FHC Bible lectureships. But this particular statement was written in a 1950 article in Firm Foundation, and in it, Ficklin was reflecting on what he considered the real meaning of the trouble at Freed-Hardeman College. And without going into detail, in 1950, we had the biggest crisis in our school's history. If you want to know more about it, read Chapter 8 of the newly released book, By the Grace of God. That is the only plug. But during that crisis, administrators, faculty, students, people in town engaged in some good behavior and some very unchristlike behavior. And it shook the brotherhood because this was the school where the Bible was taught more than any other school. And Ficklin reflected on that. He's like, how could it happen? And he decided that the trouble wasn't just here at Henderson at Freed-Hardeman College. The trouble was throughout churches of Christ. And it was not only in the individual congregations, it was in the Christian homes from where the students and the faculty and administrators came. So he wrote this quote And I found it haunting ever since I read it a few years ago. And I think it applies and connects very well to Fred's statement. Ficklin wrote, "We have emphasized some New Testament doctrines and have neglected other very weighty matters. We have not taught Christian living as we ought to have done. And oftentimes our people are spiritually starved. Soundness in doctrine has been largely a technical matter and not often enough accompanied by godliness in life." I'm not going to delve further into Freed-Hardeman's history, examining what happened on campus once black students were admitted. Our panelists are the historians who will explore that issue. Did you notice? I just called them historians. All of us here tonight are historians. Doesn't matter if you're like me or my colleague, Dr. Corey Markham, teaching history, researching and writing history, you're still a historian. There's a great Christian thinker, Soren Kierkegaard, and this is literally the only thing I've read that he said, but he said, "We live forward, but we think backward." I'll repeat him, it's a short statement. We live forward, but we think backward. And what he means is, as we navigate life, we do so with our personal knowledge of the past. Every decision we make, every time we react when we encounter a new situation, all that is based on our own personal knowledge, our own past. Historical consciousness, the ability to think historically, that's one of the most important gifts we've received from our God. Historical consciousness allows us to remember where we've been, where we are, and where we hope to go. It allows us, with the power of the gospel, with the power of the indwelling Holy Spirit, to think critically, to identify our own 21st century blind spots, and then act to remove them.
Testing. All right. As we get started, I want to offer my own thanks to a couple of people. First and foremost, I want to thank our four panelists. From your left to right, we have Elizabeth Saunders, Nadine McNeil, Michael Jones, and Sandra Sylman. And I want to recognize that this is a vulnerable moment for each of you, and offer my appreciation for you stepping into this vulnerable space to share your experiences. And I want to recognize that for all of us here tonight, this is likely a vulnerable moment. For those fans of pop psychology, this is going to be an arena of vulnerability and authenticity. The spirit of Renee Brown will be hovering among us. But as I remind my students, or at least try to remind my students each semester, growth never happens without discomfort. And that is true academically, socially, and spiritually, no less than physically. In his Narnian Chronicles, C.S. Lewis has the Pevensie children ask of the Messianic Aslan, "Is he safe?" And Mr. Beaver responds, "Safe? Of course not, but he's good." The conversation that follows may not be safe, but it is good. I'm very thankful to all of you and to our panelists for helping this to be possible. With that being said, I will take my seat. We will begin. So in beginning, I'd like to ask each of you, and we'll begin with Dr. Saunders and work our way down, to briefly describe your experiences as a student at FHU. In particular, to what extent did you feel a sense of belonging at the school, and what circumstances or actions most shaped that perception?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation of being here. And of course, as I look through the years of those who are on the panel with me, I felt a little old at that time. So when I look at 67 and then I go to 90 and then beyond that, I feel a little old. And I guess I feel a little puzzled. Okay, now why are you asking me to give my thoughts and my experience here? Because of the number of years. But my experience is going to be a little different from those on the panel because I enrolled in 1966. And of course, that was a year out of segregation and about a year into integration. There were 2 black students who enrolled in 1965 at the university. And of course, they left before I got here. And so we're looking at a different time in history. And of course, I think you have to think about, and I think Dr. Massey mentioned some of this, I think you have to think about what was happening in our country along this time in the 60s. It was a turbulent time in our country in the 60s. There were race riots in almost every city in our country. Vietnam protest in almost every city in our country, so a very turbulent time. And I think our schools and our universities reflect that. And so I entered in a very turbulent time, and of course continued my education in a very turbulent time. But I enrolled in 1966 with about 9 of my classmates from high school. We had spent about 12 years together. We went through 1st grade through 12th grade, and we decided that we would enter Freed-Hardeman University. We enrolled in Freed-Hardeman University in 1966. And of course, we were isolated because you have to think about this time. Again, just a year into integration, but just simply isolated. We were all commuter students, and so we attended class, but after classes were over, we went home. And so that was mainly our experience being here on campus. There was not a sense of belonging here. We just simply felt that we attended classes. It was like attending high school, classes in high school. And we went home after the classes were over. But as a group, we developed a sense of solidarity among us. We were not in the same classes, but after classes, we would meet together and talk about some of our problems and some of our difficulties here on campus. Here again, it was mainly toleration, mainly isolation. A few students reached out to us, a few of the faculty members reached out to us, but that very first semester was very difficult. We had no advising. I think we were assigned advisors, but the advisors refused to talk with us. And so we had to struggle through that first semester. But after that first semester, we got together as a group, and we found one professor on campus who would talk with us and who would work with us. And we would all gather around that particular professor, and he would give us some advising. And so after that first semester, we began to learn the process of being here on campus. And after that first semester, of course, we did see a sense of accomplishment as far as the classes. But it was a new experience for us. Some of our difficulties was college readiness, as well as being culturally different. Of course, the college readiness probably was the main thing that we were struggling with because of the lack of advising there. But as I said, we struggled through that first semester and we got through our classes. As I reflect back, and here again, we're looking at over 30-some years, so it's difficult to reflect back on some of those experiences there. But of course, life happens, and throughout 66 and 67, most of the students that I enrolled with, those 9 students that I enrolled in, withdrew. Of course, life happens. The young ladies, girls got married, and of course some of the young men decided to go into their own forces, and then some decided to leave the city of Henderson or larger cities. And so that last semester of summer, 1967, I was the only Black student on campus. And of course, that semester was the semester that I planned to graduate. And so I spent my time just simply working in my classes and my academic work. There was not much social life as far as on campus during that time. One of the social clubs, however, did reach out to us, and that was the Eucadian Social Club, did reach out to us. And so we felt a part of that. They extended their hand to us and welcomed us to their meetings, and also had a chance to participate in some of their athletic events there. But as far as looking at that experience here again, it was a new experience for all of us. I'm sure a new experience for the administration and faculty and students here on campus, as well as the 9 Black students who enrolled in 1966.
We fast forward to 1987. That's when I enrolled here at Freed-Hardeman University. It was many more African American students, about 50 at that time. When you think about being welcome and feeling welcomed in a place, you think about people with open arms and excited to see you there. There were many people who had open arms and smiles welcoming us here, but it was also rebel flags and other things waving as we came on campus. Many times I would hear students say they didn't know who to trust. You would see someone who would shake your hand, hug you, and smile, but then behind closed doors, or you may hear someone who mentioned different things were said or different things were done. Students would say they did not feel as if they were protected necessarily, or even seen by individuals at the university. Again, being welcome, being told you're welcome, but not being visible was one of the things that's often been mentioned. When I think about my experience, I thought back to some of the things that I've encountered at Freed-Hardeman, but I wanted to know more, so I also talked with some of the other students that were here to help refresh my memory. And as I talked with them, they talked a lot about the camaraderie here. They talked about the love at Freed-Hardeman University. They talked about the teachers that they had. And they said that no one overtly was very negative or did anything to them as far as administration-wise. But it was often mentioned that covertly, but under the table or behind closed doors, there were often things perhaps that came back out to them. And much of the negative treatment that was provided to the Black students or African American students at the time came from other students. Some of the horror stories or negative stories you would hear would be things like one particular Halloween, there was a student who put on a Ku Klux Klan, like Grand Wizard's outfit. It was a real outfit. The person even told who it belonged to and his family. And he paraded up and down the campus in front of the Auditorium. The students were outraged, the African American students were outraged, and they told the administration. And at that time, we don't recall what, if anything, was done. However, later on, we realized rules were made that was no longer allowed. Another negative incident, student to student, was there was a Black song group on campus. Some people may remember Deliverance sang on campus, and as Deliverance was singing at one of the boys' dorms as they prepared to leave back, there was water and urine thrown out the window and poured on the individuals' heads. and they were yelling, there were 2 or 3 individuals they remember yelling at them, "Niggers, go home." And the young ladies who were telling me the story, I remember they told me at that time, and then they told me again for this panel, that they thought that doesn't happen in the 80s. That doesn't happen at Freed-Hardeman. Nobody treats people that way any longer. And all they could do was cry. And all they could do was question the university and the people here. And wonder, could they really trust anyone? So it was a hard time. Some of the people mentioned things that happened or that they wanted to do, and stated that the university would allow things to be done, for example, the Deliverance Group, or allow the Black Social Club that was created at the time, Gamma Style Makeup. But there was not support, or that there did not seem to be visibility or interest in it. And so a lot of the comments that I heard and the thoughts perhaps from that time frame was, we were here, we were welcome, but we were the other. Or we were here, we were welcomed, we were invisible. No one really perhaps wanted to know of the needs of individuals or the experiences of the individual. It was just blending in and going on with things, and you'll be okay.
Well, I'm what people call a townie. I grew up here in Henderson. Both my parents came to Freed-Hardeman. They didn't end up graduating here. My older brother came. He didn't graduate, so I was like, Freed-Hardeman's probably not the best place for me. So I ended up going to Middle Tennessee State University for a couple of years, and I ended up transferring and coming to Freed-Hardeman. And that was a big transition for me coming back, because from going from a state university to here, it was natural for there to be a transition. But one of the things was interesting for me, just kind of, I guess I'll go back a little bit. Growing up here, I always had the opportunity to come on campus and to see who was here. And so there were so many people who I looked up to, who were students here before I even got here, who I wanted to spend time with when I got here, because I felt like they were going to be a mentor to me. And so these were African American men and women who were students here, and those are the people I wanted to be like when I got here. But by the time I ended up getting here and became a student at Freed-Hardeman, it wasn't what I felt like was supposed to be. One thing about me, I came with one of my good friends, started out here, and I'm a little bit loud, I'm a little bit boisterous, I'm extreme extrovert, and so I was going to be heard regardless, and that was just kind of the way I looked at it. And so because of that, there was things that worked out very well in my favor. Now, I met my wife here, and I was very excited about that. I was a president of a social club, a new social club that started on campus. I was excited about that. But one thing I was noticing, it's kind of interesting, you brought that story up too, that there was a social club that was here, and I remember going to, we had a club night, and I was noticing that in all these people's rooms, the Confederate flag is flying everywhere, and then in the night of the social club thing, we have the Confederate flag is right there too. And that really bothered me, because I went to a state university, I didn't see anything like that, and I'm here at a Christian university, and I'm seeing things like this. So I go to one of the deans, and I ask myself, so what? I'm new here, and I'm new to Freed-Hardeman, not new to the city. Why is this still happening? And the basic response I got was, that's the way things have always been, and so we don't really see the need in changing that. And so when you hear that being told to you on multiple occasions, when you see things that are going on, it gets you to the point where you feel like, I'm here, but I'm really not that important. And the things I have to say really don't make a difference. Pay tuition, graduate, get out, don't come back. And so that really had a really negative effect on me. I remember, I can remember one class that I was in, and it was interesting. We talk about covert and overt things that people do. And I had a professor that it was really weird. There was 3 African American guys in our class we had. And for some reason, anytime the word black came up, he could have been talking about black socks, he could talk about black anything. literally within 30 seconds of that, he would call on one of us in the class. And at first I thought, this is just a coincidence. But then I started having my white classmates, so like, did you pick up on that? I was like, yeah, that's really kind of weird. And so it's like, it kept being this thing where it was like, it almost became a joke to this person that to always call out after the word black would come out and we were being called upon. Fast forward to another class. Took a class where I was, we'll say a speech. We'll put it that way. And so we all had to give a speech in this class, and I can remember getting up and doing my speech, and as I'm doing it, I'll introduce myself, and then someone says, "Amen." And that just kind of threw me off a little bit, because I was like, not sure why I was saying amen for me saying my name. And then a couple more minutes, I'll say one other thing, it's amen. And so this kept going to the point where it was distracting. Get it, brother, preach it. And I'm just like, what in the world is going on right now in this class? And then by the time this finishes, after 10 minutes over, I'm confused. People are just smiling back at me, and then the comment is made, but didn't that make you feel like you're at a black church? And I was just like, no, it didn't. And from that point forward, it helped me to see that, at least I felt that my experiences really was in some way, it was a joke. That the things I'm going through, the things I'm experiencing, it's funny. It's a joke. It's just something to laugh about. But for me, it was really important because, I'm just trying to do my best to graduate. I'm trying to finish up and be the first person in my family to graduate. But even though these things are funny to someone else, to me they're very serious. And so when I think back about my experience, there are good things that happened, but there are also a lot of things that I look back on and just wonder, why did I have to go through those things? Why did I have to experience those things? And it wasn't just because of the color of my skin. Like I said, I was able to do a lot of great things while I was here, but just some of the situations that I was placed in that I didn't ask to be placed in, it left me with the question when I graduated, well, why did I have to go through that?
First, I'd like to thank Micah for being so persistent in us having this event, because Micah went through a lot to get this event done and finding all the panelists. So big thank you to Micah and to all the panelists for being a part, and to President Shannon for taking interest in this and allowing us to host something like this on campus. So before I talk about my experience, I just want to give you a little pre-op on where I'm from. Unlike the other panelists, I am not from West Tennessee. I'm from East Tennessee, which can seem like a whole nother world if you've ever been to Chattanooga, Knoxville area. So as I was sharing with some of the panelists before, with me being from Chattanooga coming here, that was already a bit of culture shock, which will surprise you because, like I said, it's just the other side of Tennessee. I went to a high school where it was probably about half and half as far as diversity, black and whites go, and then a big variety of Middle Eastern students, Hispanics, stuff like that. So just a big variety. And then I come to Freed-Hardeman, and on my very first day, I share an experience with one of my teammates, still love to this day. Interface, welcome home. That's the big talk of it. Welcome home, welcome home, welcome home. As soon as you get here, it's we're here to love you, and you feel the love. You feel it, just like how Miss Nadine talked about how you see the smile on everybody's faces. Nobody is frowning at you. They want you to feel welcomed. Well, about 10 minutes in the interface, I meet one of my teammates for like the second time, and everybody's just talking about where they're from, the high schools, and she shares with me that she graduated with a very small high school class, probably about 100 students. While talking about her high school class, she tells me that she also graduated with all white students. So this is fast forward 2015. Doesn't seem not that long ago, only 4 years ago. But she is sharing with me still that she did not graduate or go to high school with a single person of color. So from then, still felt no tension, still feel all the love because it is what it is. I'm not gonna sit here and judge her for it. But as the school year goes on, we have tension. There's just different areas where we have conflict. And like I said, from the moment we met each other, there was no, oh, I dislike you because you're black. Oh, I dislike you because you're white. But because of our cultural differences, during that first year, there was conflict between us amongst many of my teammates and just in sports in general. Later in that school year, in my hometown, there was a lot of gun violence going on between police and people, a lot of black on black crime. And 2015, 2016, I know a lot of us remember the Black Lives Matter movement was huge, especially in the South. So with us, it's probably about I think it's 4 black girls on the team that year. So a lot of us related to those experiences. Like I said, I've lost many friends to gun violence just since I've graduated high school and been here at Freed. Being here, I was not able to express myself about those losses or mourn for my own people in the way that I felt like I should, because I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around certain people, because a lot of people hear Black Lives Matter and single out, oh man, they're only talking about Black Lives Matter. Like, what kind of movement is this? A lot of people can't see the support in it. So there, I felt that isolation in that sense of not feeling any belonging. I don't have people here that I can vent to. I see somebody that I went here with all 4 years we came in together. We used to joke about this, saying how we always had to stick together, that isolation. That was something Miss Sanders talked about. And it wasn't that we didn't want anything to do with white people, but so many cultural differences. It's hard for us to be ourselves. A lot of times going in classes, I did not always have dreadlocks my entire time here. I actually got them after my first year. So my first year, my hair was curly. I would wear it natural, like within the afro, braids, different things. And the remarks that I would get about my hair or just style, preference, it just makes you feel as if you can't be yourself. So it's almost like you live a double life, which can be which you shouldn't have to do. It's very hard at this age too, because you're learning so much about yourself and trying to connect to other people around you, while at the same time, that sense of aloneness. And I see a lot of my peers in here making certain faces at me, and it's like, it's so many things you're unaware of because you're not the one who's sitting in the classroom where nobody looks like you. Like, just imagine yourself getting up to speak, sharing your personal experiences in front of a classroom where nobody looks like you. And I know that for some people that's hard to picture, and for some people that's easy to picture, but it does bring some difficulty. You reserve some things you might say, even nerves, fear, just from being judged. So my 4 years was very similar to a lot of the experiences they've shared, but also very different, because now Black culture is so much more embraced for us than it is them. We see everybody doing the hip hop dance trends. We see everybody singing the songs. We see everybody having the trends, the dance styles. But when it comes down to the real heart of Black culture, it's not accepted. So everybody wants to do the TikTok memes and the dances from the rappers. But when the Black man is getting gunned down on TV, we can turn our face to it. So it's the same thing as that. We're welcoming you, but it's very hard for you to be yourself, not intentionally, but just because of the cultural gap that we have here at Freed.
Thank you. So from this point, we're gonna just open it up in terms of, as I ask a question, as the Spirit leads, jump in there. So I want to build on something that you mentioned, Nadine, expand on it, I guess. Dr. Cornetta Roberson of Villanova University published a study a few years back exploring the distinctions between the concepts of diversity and inclusion. And in that study, she notes that diversity initiatives, which focus on increasing the presence of different demographic groups, those initiatives often fail to accomplish inclusion, which she describes as, quote, a person's ability to contribute fully and effectively to an organization. So in other words, inclusion represents the degree to which diverse members of an institution, in this case a school, feel that they are welcomed, valued, and a critical part of that institution, not in spite of their backgrounds or in sacrifice of their different perspectives, but because of them. So I give all that background to ask this. Some of you have talked about that distinction between diversity and inclusion and the lack of a sense of inclusion. Can you pinpoint changes that might have increased your sense of inclusion on campus?
I'll jump in. I teach counseling, and one of the things, and I'm a therapist as well, and one of the important things about therapy is the person's story. When someone comes in, you're there to hear their story, to know what experience they've been through, and hopefully be able to help work them through that whole process. And I feel like for me, I think that this is one aspect I think would have helped is for people to actually sit down and hear our stories and the things that we are experiencing while we were here. And I think from that, there can be some understanding and hopefully some change can come from that. But I think we're not focused on that anymore. We're focused on how many students can we get in and things of that nature. And I think that's not just a Freed-Hardeman thing. I think it's a general thing. I think that the real issue is actually having that opportunity to hear people's stories and not just make assumptions about individuals. There's diversity just in 4 of us who are up here. And so to make an assumption, well, everybody's experience the same, it's not. We've all had different experiences. But until you get someone's story and their background, know their why and why they do certain things, then when you understand them, then you know how to work with somebody. But when you don't, when that opportunity never presents itself, then there's never an opportunity for there to be any growth or for there to be any change. So I think there has to be more opportunities where people are listening to what's going on in our backgrounds. And when you understand me and you get me, then I feel heard. And when I feel heard, I feel important. And when I feel important, I'm invested. But if that process doesn't happen, I don't feel invested.
I think those opportunities for engagement, interaction are vital. Because when you think about diversity, you can have different people on campus, but oftentimes, as you have different people here, we're looking at individuals with the concept of color blindness or color neutral. And when you do that, you're simply seeing people all as the same. Instead of doing that, it's important that we see people as they are, that we're willing to interact and learn about one another, to learn about the needs of individuals, to learn about the perceptions of individuals, to learn about the way that they understand and see things, to learn their culture, to learn their traditions, to learn about one another, so that we can grow together. If we're doing the colorblind thing again and just seeing everyone neutrally the same, then there is no need for change. We'll simply continue to do things as we've always done them. But when we're able to learn about one another, we're able to see that there are needs that individuals have, that we can do things in a different way, or do additional things to help support the people, all of the individuals who are here and meet their needs.
I think also finding the courage to come out of our comfort zone is a problem that we deal with, and it's one that I still deal with. But I think if we can find that courage, and sometimes it may take some teaching, some training, and some actual experiences as far as getting us out of that comfort zone. And I think those of you, and I think it's something that will carry not only here in this university, but will outside of the university. For example, when you think about going on campaigns, when you think about door knocking, you've got to get out of that comfort zone and you've got to be able to approach that person and engage with that person. And so I think that's something that we really need to work on here as a university. I see it from the administration, from the faculty, from the staff, even from the students. I think it needs to be a university-wide attempt to help our students to do that. And not only help our students, but simply help faculty, administrators to do that. And I think that's a skill that's going to carry over, because I see that as far as carrying the gospel. Carrying the gospel, you've got to find that courage to walk up to that person and engage that person and talk to that person about Christ and the church. And so it's going to be a carryover skill. But getting us to get out of that comfort zone, and so I'm sure there are awareness type activities, I'm sure there are experiences that we can provide for our students to help them to be able to get out of that comfort zone. Because I see a lot of students, while I was teaching here on campus, afraid to get out of that comfort zone. I'm afraid to approach you because I don't know what you're going to say. I don't know what you're going to do. You know, you don't look like me, so I'm afraid to approach you. But getting out of that comfort zone, finding that courage to do all that. And that's something that here again, and I'm still dealing with. I still pray over to help me to get out of that comfort zone where I can approach people and engage those people into a conversation and work with those people.
To add on to that, what she's saying about that courage and just adding open-mindedness. When you do have that opportunity on campus for students still go here or who are part of FHU, when you do have that opportunity, come very open-mindedly. I've had a lot of people come up to me and assume very crazy things about me because I was black. For starters, my parents are split. I come from poor in the city because of this or that, or something because my hair is a certain way, or just most random stuff I never really even thought about myself, but it's just because of stereotypes that have gone down for generations and generations. Go back to my teammate that I met that said she had never met a black person. So much of our conflict was from stereotypes, things that she had just assumed. She assumed I would be loud. She assumed I was going to be using all these different, it's just doing random things, and that just put up a barrier from the jump for us. So even though we had met, it still was like a glass wall in between us, holding us from connecting. So sometimes there isn't much opportunity at Freed because like we're working on diversity here, it's not much diversity offered. But sometimes go out your way, come out your comfort zone, and just be open to whatever that person has to say, their different experiences, because you'd be surprised. Everybody's very different, like you can see from us four up here.
So we are in the midst of our sesquicentennial celebration. And the title of our panel tonight, Not 150 for Everyone, may seem provocative to some, but it describes a very straightforward reality. That is, that in the midst of a celebration of an institution spanning several generations, we are just now approaching the close of the first generation of Black acceptance within this institution. To put it another way, only about 1/3 of FHU's history to date has included Black membership. So with that preface, how much does that reality shape the way that our panelists think about the commemoration this year? One alum has phrased the sensation as, quote, celebrating a history we weren't allowed to be a part of, close quote. Does your experience resonate with that line, and why or why not?
Well, of course, when I saw this particular question, I guess my focus was more general. I just simply saw it as the founding of the university, not when and where I entered the university, but just simply the founding of the university itself. And of course, I tend not to focus a lot on the past, but I try to focus more on the here and now, things that I can change, and what I can do as far as being able to learn and grow daily. But as far as that particular question, here again, my focus was just the founding of the university and not on when and where I entered the university.
I can agree with that because that's exactly what I thought about when I heard 150 years. I was excited for Freed-Hardeman because I love Freed-Hardeman. Even going through different things here and experiences of others, I've enjoyed being here. I've enjoyed my tenure here from 87 until now. I enjoy it. However, listening to the readings from the speaker earlier reminded me of when I first came, and I would hear the stories about Black students who weren't allowed. I had totally forgotten about Kevin Bowers, who's my husband's aunt's brother, not being allowed to come. Things I've totally forgotten, I'm remembering again. And it's just making me think about times that were and how different are they now. Again, no covert, negative actions done necessarily, but then thinking about how far have we truly come and how short a time it was that Blacks have been admitted here.
This will be 22 years since I graduated from Freed. It's just weird even saying that out loud. This is maybe my third time back on campus in the entire time period. And And I think a lot of that has to do, and we talk about this 150 years, I used the word story earlier. I don't really see my part in the story of Freed-Hardeman, if that makes any sense. And so I am excited for the university for being around this long and the great things the university has done. I've got a great education when I was here, but when it comes for me as a celebration, for me, there's not for me on my aspect, there's not a lot for me to celebrate because I'm not a part of the things I've experienced, really anything to celebrate. And so that's for me. It's a weird thing, I guess, from that aspect. I haven't been back, and I'm from here, and that's even the more complicated piece to that. It's just there's not a lot for me on that end to celebrate.
I think that most of us would agree, as we are here, that this discussion and conversation about minority experiences and race relations at FHU matters. My next question, though, is what do you each see as the most desirable outcomes of this discussion? Why does this conversation matter, particularly to you?
This conversation really matters to me because it's beyond Freed-Hardeman, this issue itself. Of course, this is a national issue that we have going on. It's like from the time you are in kindergarten, growing up as a black student, you are taught about slavery from the point at which we were brought over here to the States. So we don't learn our history from beyond any of that when we came from our land, who we were before then. That's why they call black people basically the lost culture, because our culture is lost. We're brought here, and then from that time on, you're taught about slavery, but it's still from the standpoint that you are under, because you're learning from the beginning of time that you were here. You were seen as this. Merely got better, but you were seen as this. And you come here to Free and to tag on to the 150th, it's like a big celebration, but then it's like smacking the face because my grandma couldn't even go here. When I look back at my grandma, couldn't even attend here to see how old she is. So out of this event, mainly, just to be eye-opening, to be aware, because it's nothing we can change overnight. I mean, of course, not even everybody is here, but it's still nothing that can change overnight. It's something you have to be conscious of every day as you walk past people. And just being aware of people around you as you see different students here from different cultures, minorities, trying to be respectful of the things they observe, the way that they dress, trying to find ways to understand stuff that might not even make sense to you. Because coming here is like I'm forced into someone else's culture versus everything that I've learned my whole life. So I could look at it the same way and say, wow, this stuff is weird. You know, this is crazy. I didn't grow up doing this. I would never dress like this, you know. But we are forced to have that same outlook on other cultures because it's everywhere around us. So try to, as hard as that sounds, put yourself in that person's shoes, because it's nothing we can do to change past or anything that's already happened. Only how you interact with the people from here on out. So people that attend here, you have like all power within your hands. Because I went here for 4 years and I walked past so many people that I never spoke to, vice versa. And a lot of times I wish that I did, because just my experiences themselves, I can connect to them. Like I said, my friend Carrie had never met a black person. I was like honored to be one of the first that she got to interact with. And from there, she's told me how many more relations have come easier to her just from our relationship, how many more people she's been able to communicate with spiritually. Like, that's why I say it's so big, it's so beyond just black and white, because somebody touched on it earlier. What better way to be able to spread God's word when you can just spread it with anybody, like not white church, black church, Mexican church, when it's just one message, everybody can be uniform within it. So, and that's why it's kind of heartbreaking for Freed, because this place is, you can feel God's presence on this campus. It's so heavily Christian oriented, but we see so much division. And I know in the Bible it talks about how Jesus surrounded himself with sometimes the sinners, the bad people, the people that everybody's seen as low, so he could reflect his light upon them, treat them as equal. The Bible even talks about how it says, come as you are, everybody into church, no matter your appearance, any of that, but then we still see black and white church and stuff like that. So it's just a matter of every day, to me, being conscious and aware. It's no big event. that we can host, no rules you can really put in place. It's just people being more aware every day of the people around them.
I want to piggyback off of that because as you're asking why is it so important, it's important because it's not just about Freed. You're right. This is the church we're talking about. We're talking about as people come in to learn more, to be embraced by Christians, and then they leave feeling negative about the church. Feeling as if the church is hypocritical, not wanting to be a part of the church. We're not shining the light and not bringing people to Christ if we're not welcoming them and truly showing them love and trying to learn about them to meet their needs. How can we teach anyone? How can we truly share with them if we're not willing to open our arms, open our ears, and learn about the individuals and explore what they have to bring? Together we can, if we are united, we can grow the church. It can expand like it's supposed to, instead of turning people off.
I think this discussion matters because the university, of course, is affiliated with the Church of Christ. And sometimes students who enter here, this is the only thing that they see. They see Christ, and hopefully they see the example that we are setting. But I think as Christians and as a university affiliated with the Church of Christ, we are held to a higher standard. And I see that, and I try as a person to try to reflect on that each day, that I need to rise to a higher standard. No matter what anybody else is doing around me, I still need to set that standard as a Christian. And so I think the things that we have talked about and the different panelists have mentioned here are the things, are the concepts that Christ taught. When you think about the golden rule, it's the same. And I think it comes down to an individual. You have to make up in your mind as an individual that you're going to be the person that Christ wants you to be. It's an individual concept that we need to work on. We can talk about the group here, what the group needs to do, what the university needs to do, but I think it's in an individual. Each of us is an individual. We've got to make up in our minds that this is what I want to do. This is what I want to reflect. I want to reflect Christ in my life. And if I do that, then I need to reach out to others. And so here again, because we are affiliated with the Church of Christ, here again, we're held to a higher standard. And as Christians, we're held to a higher standard that we need to live by.
I want to say one thing. I think if you think about any relationship, love demands some type of sacrifice if you're going to be in a relationship with anybody. And I think that's the gist of what Ayers is saying, is that if we're going to be in a relationship, sacrifices have to be made. Everything can't be my way. Everything can't be your way. We have to be able to come to the table and be able to figure out how do we live amongst each other, and how do we spread this gospel to each other. But it takes time, it takes sacrifice for that to happen. And there is no program out there that's going to say, we do follow step A, B, and C, then this will work. It doesn't work that way. The only way this works is if we leave here tonight and we make a commitment, a personal commitment to ourselves, and also a commitment to God that I'm going to start treating people different from now than I ever have before. And I think when we start actively doing that, that's what changes. Programs don't change things. People do. And I think when we start just taking our own individual responsibility for my actions, because I can't control what anybody else does, but I have control of what I do and how I treat people. And so if I make that commitment that I'm going to be a different person because I know it's the right thing to do, and I'm going to do this because I love them, and I'm going to sacrifice them because I love this individual, and I want to see them in heaven with me one day. I think when we all start doing that, that's when change begins to happen. And then I think if that happens long enough, we don't have to have these conversations anymore. But I don't think that's going to happen until we start doing something about it.
What one thing would you most want a white Freed-Hardeman student or a white faculty member or administrator to understand about being a black student at FHU?
I'm thinking back off something you said earlier. There's a term called code switching, where basically I have to act a certain way with this group of people, and then another group of people, I have to do that. And so, I'm not sure if you know it, code switching is very exhausting because I just don't get to be myself. And so it's very nice to be able to do that. Whenever we hear this term assimilation, when you assimilate, you lose a part of yourself in that. But when you're put in spaces where you are being the one asked to assimilate every single day, whether it's at work, whether it's at school, whether it's at church, you're giving part of yourself away every single day. And that gets tiring and that gets frustrating. And when you don't have a place to be able to talk about that or deal with that because you don't see people who look like you, that wears on you. So my thing is, I think if we all can get to a place where we can start encouraging people to be themselves and being okay with that. Be okay with somebody being different from you and accept it and try to learn from that. I think we'll be okay. And that way people don't have to worry about, am I talking the right way? Am I sounding too black? Whatever the case may be, can I just be me? If we all can do that, I think that will make a big difference.
One thing that I think that administration and faculty perhaps should know is something I've heard throughout the years, from being here as a student to teaching the last 20 plus years here, is that the students look to us to protect them. They look to us to correct the wrong. If something is said out of place in the classroom, if something is done on campus, they need to be able to come to us, faculty, administration, and address it, have it heard, and then have some understanding of what is being done or what can be done. It should never be a time where a racist act takes place in the classroom and the student looks up, students are all looking around, and the teacher just teaches, ignores it. A racist act takes place on campus. The whole campus is whispering about it, and administration says nothing. There is no action followed up with a correction of what has been done. Now, I'm not saying these things have been done currently, but I'm saying if they are done, and historically, throughout the years, they have been done, then administration and faculty, the students look to you to be their protectors, to you to correct the wrong.
Okay, I think the question, what one thing would you most want a white student at FHU or white faculty member or administrator to understand about being a black student at FHU? When I thought about this particular question, I thought about what do I want people to see as a human being and how do I perceive human beings? Because first of all, I'm a human being. And I want you to see me as a human being. And I see you as a human being. And I even break it down further because through the years I've been dealing with periods of illness, close to death a lot of times. And so I see myself and I see others, and I like to refer to this because it's a concept from the Bible. And this is a concept that I try to teach my students as we worked along in class. That we're nothing but dust and ashes that God has given a soul to. So when I look at you and when you look at me, that's what we are. And to dust and ashes we're going to go back to. And when you can begin to perceive people like that, that should change your perspective. Because we're always one day closer to death. And I've looked death in the eye several periods in my life. And that's what I think about. When I see you as a soul. I see you as dust and ashes. And that's what we are. And that's what we're going to go back to. And so it doesn't matter what color my skin is. It doesn't matter how my hair looks. It doesn't matter how I dress. But that's That's what we are, and that's what we will go back to. And so I think if you can keep that focus in the back of your mind, you'll begin to treat people better. And there's no little I's and no big U's, because that's mainly what it boils down to. So when I think about the president, even to the janitorial staff, that's what I see, because that's what we are. And that puts it plain and simple, and you understand that. And so when we begin to see people like that, you focus on that. Because eventually all of us are going to go that way. Christ is coming. We're going to go that way. And so just think about that as you meet people who look different than you do, not the same color, but wear the same clothes, from different countries. That's what we look at. We look at souls. And of course, those of you who go on campaigns to other countries and different cultures, that's what you need to look at. You look at this as a soul. And it doesn't matter how that person dresses, how he looks, where he lives. He's a soul.
Beautiful statement. I kind of like to spin off of that as far as along the lines of racial equality and accepting the reality of where we are as a society, as a community with racial equality. Buckle up. My thing for white people is to accept your white privilege. And this is not saying it to flaunt it or that black people are mad at white people for having white privilege, but it is the reality of the world we live in because of the times. There are privileges that white people get that aren't literally something being handed out to you, but just in different scenarios, experiences, where because of your race, something might be different for you than it is for me. Not mad at anybody for it because it is the way it is with times that there are. But when white people can accept that, then they will be able to see the perspective of the black person a little bit better. Like, it's hard for me to... Every day I worry about my brothers. I have a brother that is 30 years old and I have a brother who's a senior in high school. Both of them have dreadlocks, well, had dreadlocks, they cut them off. Both of them cut them off because of the attention and the behavior of the people around them based off of their hairstyle. So I fear for my brothers driving every day in traffic because somebody might see them and see, whoa, they fit that stereotype. And boom, that could be my brother's life. My brothers are in an automatically different situation because of the complexion of their skin. Not saying anybody in this room will look at anybody that way, but it is the world that we live in. So a part of us building that bridge is accepting sometimes things are different because of just the sad reality that we are in. And it would just be help you to be able to sympathize for things like Black Lives Matter movement. Because a lot of people can't understand that. You see a black man go shoot another black man, and then you see black people running around holding up signs protesting. It doesn't add up all the time. But when you can see things for what it is, as far as the police brutality we see in the real white on black crime and the white privilege behind it and how a lot of people are getting away with things, then you'll be able to understand movements like that and support black culture. Because sometimes it is hard for me to fully embrace things of white culture because I might not be able to understand them, to relate to them, same vice versa. So just accepting certain things and not so much feeling hostility, because this is not a point of hostility. All this is just the facts, the reality of everything. We just have to work with what we have. So just accepting that and trying to see when it is happening, trying to be aware of it happening, and just help you open your eyes to different things around you, people around you.
And our last question, what gaps do you perceive between what you envision as an ideal student experience at Freed-Hardeman and your own experience? And as importantly, what suggestions might you encourage the FHU community to consider institutionally and or as individuals to begin bridging those gaps between ideal experience and your experience?
Okay, well, I just left Freed, so I kind of know what's going on campus and the vibe the campus and things have. And like we said, there's not really an event we can host or things, but just different cultural activities, especially during months like Black History Month, just raising awareness, letting those different students be able to share their perspective, whether you have an event where they're allowed to provide food of their different culture, just different small things. Because like I told you, there was a girl that I met in 2015 who hardly knew anything about Black culture. I mean, just a simple recipe would have been something enlightening to her. Just small things, because you got to start somewhere. So like even just having events on campus, I know we used to talk about this when we went here, just allowing people to express themselves more freely, and not frowning upon different culture styles of dress, especially. I keep hitting on hairstyles because hairstyles was something I struggled with so much at Freed, with people asking me, was my hair real, or why is it nappy, or when am I getting it redone? You know, things that can come off very offensive, but it's just out of blatant ignorance. Ms. Nadine allowed us to have the opportunity in her class to do a culture walk, and we also had the chance to present our presentations of different cultures. And luckily, I was fortunate enough to present on Black culture, my favorite. So during that time, she allowed us to bring in different things, show videos, and I brought in a bunch of my hair products. Starting with bonnets that I sleep in, products that I use, and you could just see a connection. Like, and not saying everything was just happy, but you could just see the correlation. People starting to understand, oh, that's why their hair will look like this on this day. Oh, that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. And it's just, from there on, I promise you, I did not hear as many ignorant statements as I have been hearing about my hair. And just that little bit is just more welcoming, because you understand me just this much more. And that means this much more on the grand scale. So I don't really know where I was going with all that, but just small things on campus as far as events and stuff like that, implementing. I know people here could probably reflect more on that, but you got to start somewhere with just events for different minorities here, and not just Blacks, Hispanics, even people who aren't really represented here. Having them come in and speak sometime during chapel, just giving people that opportunity, because just us doing this next year, that don't mean we're just gonna have diversity flocking around everywhere. So we might have to bring people in or go out into Jackson more. You'd be surprised, you go up the street 20 minutes from here and it's like nothing but Black people everywhere, and then you come back here. It's just crazy, 20-minute difference, but just maybe getting out a little bit further, or having those people come here to add more diversity for students here. Yes, sir.
I'd say representation matters. I think it's important that for whether it's faculty, staff, or the case may be, I think that would be important to see more of that happening, but not just for the sake of having a face that looks different. I think that along with their responsibility of bringing on a diverse faculty and staff, let them also have a voice as well. You can have a full staff of individuals who are people of color, but if they have no voice or not yet, or have the ability to say what they feel, then it's kind of pointless. I've been in a situation before where I was purposely hired to be the minority hire at the university. And I was okay with that, but it came with a caveat. I was like, I will come and I'll be your minority hire, but my mouth just come with me as well. And so I'll come, but I get to speak too. And you have to deal with every part of me and my passion. I'm not angry, I'm just passionate about things. And so when you allow both those two things to happen, I think that makes a big difference, because I think the more diverse you can have things going on a campus, it shows that we're doing what Christ has called us to be in the first place. Because we're going to be surprised when we get to heaven. So I just think it's important for us to be able to see that, but let them have that voice as well.
I say to simply continue things like this, continue opportunities for us to talk with each other, to learn about each other. More and more engagement. The more we do together, the more we can be unified.
I think some of the gaps that I have seen, of course, I think a support system. You have students who enter but are not able to graduate. And I see a lot of minority students as far as that particular area. And so providing some type of support system that includes advising, mentoring, even financial advising and assistance there. I think it would help those students, especially that first semester. That first semester is very difficult for a lot of students. And I think if they had that support, as far as advising, as far as mentoring and financial advising and assistance, I think that would help also. Also, I think a lot of maybe more outreach type activities, getting our students maybe out into various communities where there are minorities and they have a chance to actually not only work with the ones here on campus, but also into the various communities. I know in the School of Education, we'd like to take the initiative to get our students maybe into our undergrads into the Memphis area, into areas where there are a lot of minority students there, a lot of minorities there, and just people from different cultures. I think a lot of what has been said here has to do with a lot of awareness as far as our students. They just simply don't know, and they have not been exposed to some things. And so just awareness type of things as far as other cultures there. I have a student, a friend of mine was from Nigeria, and had difficulty in the dorm because the students there didn't know about Nigeria. They thought it was still jungles. They didn't know he lived in a city. And so sometimes just awareness, helping our students to be aware and providing activities where they get a chance to know about other cultures and what's happening in those other cultures and working with different people from other cultures there. And so sometimes that's gonna take leaving campus to do that, to get out where those people are and actually meet and greet and engage with those people. And I know we're doing that with a lot of our programs, but I think it needs to be more students involved in that in our university. I think we would see a difference there. And of course, as some of the others said, here again, more culturally diverse administrators, faculty, staff, and students, I think also would help.
Would you join me in showing appreciation for our panelists? A major theme of the panelists' remarks was opportunities for deeper and more frequent engagement, building those bridges. And so at this point, Mike is going to offer just a couple closing remarks and invite us into one arena for accomplishing those objectives.
Yes, thank you again. I really appreciate his comments, your vulnerability, your wisdom, your challenges. I feel like I'm a better person for having listened to you, and I hope that we'll continue to grow in this way because it is important for all of us. I mean, it benefits me as a white person to have a better understanding of another person who comes from a different background, and we're really hurting ourselves when we aren't taking advantage of opportunities to do that more. And so I have a couple of opportunities that I want us to consider coming out of this. One is for students. I would really like to see a student organization form that allows us to focus on productive and effective ways to consider how to raise some more awareness, how to engage more in some activities that are meaningful so that we can really focus on a sense of increasing a feeling of inclusion for our students who aren't white on campus. I don't think that we start with trying to diversify. We got to start with making the people that we have here feel like they are a part of this campus. They belong, even if their hair or clothing or other ideas about the world are different. Because we learn from that. We become better from that. We become a fuller church, a better reflection of the kingdom. So I hope that you'll consider joining in on that. I'm a part of a group called Be the Bridge to Racial Reconciliation. It's a national nonprofit group founded by Latasha Morrison a few years ago. And I latched onto it because it has a biblical foundation to it. and I love Tasha. So I want to start, I would like to see the group start here. Nadine and I led a conversation using some of their discussion material, and it was really impactful, I think, but it's not enough. This conversation is not enough. You know, we have to find a way to get the momentum and keep going. So in a few weeks, at least after lectureship, there's a little too much going on, right, Doug? We're going to send out an email, maybe put a chapel announcement in, letting you sign up to be a part of organizing that group and try and form something productive here. The other thing that's available for everyone, I would like to find a way to create spaces where we are able to have conversations like this that are more interactive between people who are Black and people who are white, people who are Hispanic, and other racial groups and other backgrounds, or international students. You know, I would like to create these spaces where we can have discussions, where we are free to discuss, because there's a lot of tension in this area. There's a lot of sensitivity. There's a lot of fear of even opening your mouth. So we need to create some spaces where we can do that. And this would be just something where we can ask some questions. You know, it's like I have a few here that are brought. You know, tell a story about the time you experienced or observed racism. Or why does building deep friendships with people of different ethnicities matter? Or what does the word reconciliation mean? And can you think of passages in the Bible that highlight the concept of reconciliation? And, you know, I have a whole set of cards here to be the bridge, and we could come up with our own that are specific to us. And I would, if you're interested in wanting to take part in that, I have a couple of sign-up sheets just on the table out in the foyer, and consider writing your name down, writing your email address down. I also ask for your race just so I can get a sense of how many people, because it doesn't need to be just white people. This is meant to be a multicultural conversation. Okay, so write your name down on that, and if I have that, I'll email you about when we're going to meet and where. So please consider that. The last thing I want to do before we dismiss is recognize these panelists with a few gifts. The first is this lion, who I love. And these are actually pretty special. Our provost and vice president of academics, Dr. C.J. Ayers, started a tradition in the Department of Academics where people who help move the needle for the university meeting its mission are awarded a thriving lion. And I think that the people on this stage, for the work they've done tonight, deserve to be recognized as people who have helped move the needle by helping us better recognize where we can grow as a university to become better. And so I want to recognize each of them with one of these thriving lions. Also, the alumni department, along with Be the Bridge and History Department, are recognizing, providing some gifts, and I appreciate that. One is Tasha's new book, Be the Bridge, which Be the Bridge is providing. And then there's a few alumni goodies in here. Also, I want to say the President and the First Lady here purchased these lions for y'all as well. So I wanted to give each of y'all one of those and give y'all another round of applause for And you didn't get a book, Nadine, because I already gave you one. So. That's your. And the very last thing that I want to do before we dismiss is ask Kenneth to come up here. He's going to lead a prayer for us as we close out. So we can do that. Kenneth, if you'll come on up to do that. And I also want to give Kenneth a thriving lion as well, because he's worked a lot behind the scenes without as much recognition. He didn't make it on the stage. He is a person who's been very supportive in the background, and also when he has been on the stage has a lot of good things to say. So I really appreciate you. And why don't you close this out tonight? Thank you.
Just before we close, if you'll permit me a moment, I just want to first thank Micah for letting me be a part of this. This is just a matter of major importance to me, and I know to all of you. And seeing all of you crowd in, my eyes were just watering, because this, the journey that this has been, setting all of this up, even though I've played, by comparison, such a small part in putting this whole thing together, seeing everyone come in and seeing this all come together has just been so powerful to me. And I love and cherish each and every one of you as dear friends and family under Christ by blood. And I also just want to say, for a final thing, do not think that because I'm a black student that I did not learn from tonight. I want to emphasize that this is not just an attempt to just single out people that are not black or that are not of minorities. This is an attempt to get all of us to become better people, to get all of us to think outside of this box that we may often enclose ourselves in. And just for all of that and more, I just want to thank you all for being here. And at this time, let's go to our God in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day, and we thank you for all of your many blessings. Lord, I pray that the mission of tonight is recognized. That mission not being one of separation, but one of reconciliation. That mission is able to bring us all together to further emphasize the mission of your church, for which you shed your blood. Father, we thank you for allowing us to congregate here and continue to become better disciples for you each and every day. I thank you for every single person in this room. I thank you for these panelists and for their courage and their bravery, and I pray that you bless them abundantly. I thank you for Micah, for Corey, and for Greg for their leading this whole ordeal and just allowing me to be a part of it. It means the world to me to see this many people here for something this important. And Father, we thank you most of all for your Son Jesus, who died on the cross for our sins. And that even though we may have different families by earthly blood, we are all brought together by spiritual blood. We thank you for everything, and we simply pray that we further encapsulate the love that you have for us. Teach us to love the way that you love us. It's in your Son's most holy name we pray. Amen.